was wandering around the school where I work. I was actually looking for some books I put down yesterday and couldn't quite remember where I'd put them. But I had a strange feeling that they were in a history classroom. And I walked into a history classroom and it was the wrong one. And I knew that when I looked on the wall and there was a sign that said, "History about those people who made a difference." And I thought about my granddad, who was out on the trawlers. He came back, signed up, joined the Hull Pals in the what we call the T'others. They were the poor working class lads who couldn't quite fit into any of the trades or the commercials or the sporting. So the ones who didn't really matter ended up in the T'others. He went out, fought in France, stabbed through the neck with a bayonet, came back to this country, went through a bit of rest and recuperation in Kent, by which point the war had just about finished. And I wondered if he'd actually made a difference, and if he hadn't, how he fits into history. And I think that was kind of the point of this book at some point.
It was. That history, when you read it, is all about generals and majors and kings and queens. But they don't make history, we make it for them. But it's them that get remembered. And so what I wanted to write when I did the songs, and what we wanted to do with the book, was write about real people in real situations and try and highlight just how a load of little things add up to being the big thing that you read about, because it's just important to remember that it could have been any one of us that went through that. So that's about it.
Story called The Night Patrol, set south of Thinkville Ridge near Albert in northern France. Into the drizzling pitch black they weaved in front of him. He could barely see their backs, but he knew that Big Jack O'Donnelly was there, just beyond his reach, no more than a few inches from the tip of his bayonet. The deep sludge sucked at his boots, each step a weary chore that pulled at every muscle. The rifle was growing heavy, a dead weight in his hands, and still on they went, crisscrossing no man's land, looking for breaks in the wire, listening for any movement that might mean Jerry was planning something. Every few steps their course took them round another corpse, already disappearing into the mud. Poor buggers. T'others, trades, sporting, commercial, East Yorks, gone. He'd stopped listening. At times like this he thought of home, desperately wishing to be back there. For good and all, not for a break, and not in one of them nut houses neither. Back for good, alive, in one piece. Back home in Blighty with Etty and Len, and Mam and Da, me Jenny. Let bloody Jerry have his bit of French mud. Let him have it all. A flare burst into the sky, to their right bathing every square yard of no man's land in a haunting red. They instinctively stopped. Moving, they see you. Please God, no one bloody move. Please. He held his breath. The whistle of a nearby shell, and he fought the edge to duck, prayed instead that the mud might swallow him and put an end to it all. Damn, I can smell the cordite. Heard the bloody splash before the explosion. They're getting closer. The sudden silhouettes cast in the flash and flare of far-off artillery were like something ancient and mystical. Jagged edges of broken wooden fence, the mocking line of barbed wire, and long abandoned barricades all seemed to loom up at them out of the mud. Skeletal tree, free from leaves and branches, stood as idle sentries to an ocean of rumbling silence. Occasional craters were half filled with black, rank water that glowed yellow with each barrage. If you looked carefully, you could see the bodies slumped in the pools. If you want to see the old battalion, I know where they are. Blown to bloody bits, that's where. Kenton and Jones never came back this morning. We stood with Kenton as the sun rose yesterday, me and Big Jack on the fire step. Wife and 2 kids back on Linear Street. A bloody docker, not a soldier. 2 bloody kids. Another whistle. This one so loud it was unbearable. Death whistles. You soon learn that out here. Last thing anyone hears. His whole body stiffened. There was a sudden deafening crash, too loud to be heard. Sulphurous flames lapped around him. His every nerve cried out in pain as he felt himself blown backwards, the air crushed from his lungs. He couldn't remember landing. Down in hell, Joe. No getting home now. Another body in another bloody pool. There was a light glowing in the distance, a warm light. Candle, maybe? Brazier? He was walking slowly towards it, his body weightless, floating. So this is it. Another few steps and I'm out of here for good. My mother's voice clear as summer skies. Joe, time to come home. I'm coming, man, I'm coming. Joe, can you hear me, mate? The light went out and everything was dark again. Joe, Christ, I thought you were dust, son. Big Jack's face brushed his own and he struggled under the weight of his friend's body lying half on top of him. Jack was mouthing words he couldn't hear for the violent ringing in his ears. He closed his eyes and his head lolled back. I thought it was all over. Back here. Damn. Oh, Jack. He tried to turn his head to look around, to find the rest of them, count them. Count them out and count them back in. That was the bloody sticks we used for rifles on Walton Street, like children playing soldiers. Count them out and count them back in, or nothing ever gets lost. The fog in his mind began to clear, and he became increasingly aware of his immediate surroundings. The rank stench of damp mud and something burning. He'd been thrown inside a crater, his legs up to knees in black water. He was still holding his rifle. Got me legs, got me arms, still breathing. Lucky bastard. There's worse out here than this. He watched Big Jack peer over the crater's edge, his face streaked black, eyes intent on some distant horizon. There was a sudden screech and he pulled his head down sharply. An explosion, not close enough to worry him. Big Jack whispered loudly in his ear, "It's our own bloody guns, Joe!" He had no answer. He couldn't speak. The place where there used to be words was now full of silence. A rapid volley of explosions followed, deafening crashes and blinding incandescent flashes. The whole world burned and spat around him. He held his breath and bit into his lip. Our own bloody guns. "It's us, you bastards! It's us!" roared Big Jack into the storm's upsurge. After the eternity of a few seconds, stillness returned. Jack rolled off him and lay there in silence, breathing heavily, numbed. What was left of the patrol was gathering itself, waiting, watching. The bloody captain, that useless bugger Ames from the commercials. Matthew Duffy, Pete McIntosh, him and Big Jack. 5. We came out with 12. Count them out, count them back in. The stillness was broken by the sound of nearby voices. He felt suddenly paralysed. All he could do was wait and watch. They were sitting bloody ducks. It wasn't them the artillery was firing at. Jerry was out here. Close, too bloody close. He held his breath again, as if the sound of his breathing might give him away. 1 second, nothing. 2 seconds, nothing. 3 seconds. He looked helplessly across the crater. Sliding down the opposite side was first one body, then 2, then 3, and a 4th. The sky burst into incendiary white light. He gripped his rifle tighter, but his finger was limp on the trigger, the barrel pointing down at the mud. The faces across the crater stared back unmoving. Jesus, they look like scared bloody kids. One of them's crying. Bloody crying. Not one of them as old as me. Poor bastards. Nobody moved. The moment stretched out in silence. He fought to hang on to himself, to keep it together. Bitter! One of them was speaking, the one who was crying, his voice breaking, racked with fear. Too bloody young for a moustache. He felt his arm shaking on the gun. He couldn't lift it, couldn't do anything. Ames just sat there. He'd frozen. Come on, you useless bugger, do something. The silence hung there like a shroud. One of the Germans raised the barrel of his gun towards them. Damn. But he didn't fire. He just sat and stared and waited. Nobody dared do anything. Eyes darted from figure to figure, nervous, twitching. No one wanted to be the first to shoot. No one wanted to be last. Eventually, someone spoke. "All right, everybody, just be really careful. Don't do anything stupid." Big Jack raised his gun above his head and shouted across the crater. "Come on, you lot. No one's got to get shot. Just bugger off and leave us to it, eh?" 1 second turned to 2, and 2 to 3. Nobody moved. "Just go back to your own side." He could see the 4 Germans trembling, their faces frozen in terror, eyes pleading, waiting. When one of them moved, the other would too. Whether to fight or leave. Eventually, one of them started to raise his rifle. "Don't bloody do it, mate, please. Or don't be so bloody stupid. I don't want to be dead." "I don't want to shoot anyone, mate." Big Jack's voice faltered. Slowly the gun came up, more slowly than anything he'd ever seen before. So slowly you could barely see, but he knew it was moving. Come on, please." He wondered whether he could raise his own rifle to shoot. His arms were leaden. His strength had left him. "Oh, come on, please." A sudden jerk. The German held his rifle above his head. It was shaking. "Yeah?" The German started to push himself upwards until he could turn and crawl out of the crater. The others followed his lead, lowering their rifles. They turned slowly, clambered to the edge and were gone. He breathed out and took a huge gulp of rank air. The bloody enemy! He shook his head and felt his eyes damp with tears. What the bloody hell? None of them moved. It was enough just to breathe. The loudest sound he could hear between the jolts of the barrage was the pounding of his heart. What? The bloody enemy! He was suddenly aware of shuffling nearby. Ames had pulled himself up and was working his way around the crater. "Come on, lads, we can still catch them!" Nobody moved. Ames turned and looked back at them. He glowered, put his whistles between his lips and blew. Still nobody moved. Ames levelled his pistol towards Big Jack. "That's a bloody order!" Big Jack didn't flinch. Ames cocked the pistol. "Last chance, O'Donnelly." Big Jack put the butt of his rifle to his shoulder and raised the barrel to the sky. He pulled the trigger again. Ames sneered, shook his head and holstered his pistol. "I'll have you bloody court-martial for this." He couldn't see, but he knew Big Jack was laughing. "With the greatest of respect, sir, can we go back to our bloody trench now?" And with that, he turned and headed for the crater's edge. "I'm coming, Jack, I'm bloody coming." And into the drizzling pitch black, they weaved in front of him. He could barely see their backs, but he knew that Big Jack O'Donnelly was just there beyond his reach, no more than a few inches from his bayonet. The deep sludge sucked at his boots. Each step, a weary chore that pulled at every muscle. The rifle was growing heavy, a dead weight in his hands.
Thanks very much, everybody.